Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Eliamep and the Mediterranean Program's webinar on Cyprus and its new political moment. My name is Cleopatra Kitti, and I am a senior policy advisor at Eliamep and the Mediterranean Program. I'm joined today by esteemed Cypriot speakers. Prokopiou, who was going to join us today, has been appointed as Cyprus's new Justice and Public Order Minister. This is a significant mandate that needs, among other challenges in justice and security issues, to steer and complete the much-needed reform of the judiciary in Cyprus. We wish Anna wholehearted success. So the conversation today on politics, both domestic, regional, and international, on socioeconomics and the Cyprus issue will be covered in my conversation with Georgiou, economic correspondent and analyst to international news wires and to Cypriot media, and Emine Colak, lawyer and member of the Mediterranean Women Mediators Network. We are in a new political moment, as citizens of the Republic of Cyprus have just elected a new president, Mr. Nikos Christodoulidis, who is taking office tomorrow on March 1st. What is unique about this election is that Mr. Christodoulidis' candidacy has been supported primarily by smaller centrist and nationalist parties, instead of the incumbent or the larger parties of the right or of the left. That was the case until the recent past. This is a coalition of parties that in domestic policy have significant differences, but one commonality they have is how they approach the Cyprus problem. This problem, a frozen conflict of 50 or 60 years, depending on who is counting, persists in spite of how the world is changing, on how climate and technology is transforming our realities. And this problem resides within Europe. Nicosia, the capital of Cyprus, is Europe's last divided city. This Cyprus election precedes two other major general elections, one in Greece and one in Turkey, that are expected to take place this spring and summer. Our webinar today aims to bring you insights on what to expect from this new Cypriot administration, this new Cyprus president, one of the youngest in Cyprus's history. George will discuss how the new president will. George, what should we expect from President Christodoulidis in his domestic policy? Would we see anything different in the presidency of President-elect Christodoulidis to the outgoing President Anastasiadis?
Cleopatra, thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this webinar. Eliamep is always one of the top places that one can speak, and this makes me responsible of what I'm going to say. For them, at the beginning, I would like to congratulate Nikos Christodoulidis. It was a tough fight to get into the presidential palace. He was the favorite from the beginning. He's to now, what are we going to expect from him? It's going to be interesting because he was the right hand of President Anastasiadis for 9 years. And so from that perspective, he is a continuity of President Anastasiadis, and we have seen how they behave today and in every occasion, expressing gratitude to each other and wishes, warmest wishes to each other, that is not like it's that one can only see if we are talking about the continuity, and he's a continuity. President Anastasiadis last year, when he had to drop Nikos Christodoulidis from his cabinet, he did it really with a. It was really difficult for him. It wasn't something that he chose. It was part of the local politics, and because vice president Averos Neophytou was running as well for the presidency, and he was forced to drop Nikos Christodoulidis. During the campaign, he made clear that he wasn't going to take a stand between the two, something that favored Nikos Christodoulidis. And many supporters of this, they were part of his campaign. So we are talking about the continuity with a different face. And this is something that we have to acknowledge. I think Nikos Christodoulidis' election as a president of Cyprus makes clear that we are ending a period where the leader of the party and the leader had to be a strong-minded man that wouldn't be allowed to look soft or wouldn't be allowed to look that someone else is playing games on him. Nikos Christodoulidis actually, what gained him the presidency was actually this soft power that he has. He's well-spoken. During his 9 years in the presidency, he hardly made any enemies from the opposition. He had an excellent relation with the press, and I must say that he's always helpful from my experience. He is a man that knows how to speak and without making enemies and without being received as a strong man that doesn't change his opinion. And it's going to be interesting to see this new style, how we will change Cypriot politics, but to what extent remains to be seen. We also have to say that he has a partner, his wife, Philippa. She's a strong lady next to him. She campaigned heavily on behalf of him. And it's going to be really interesting to see her role. I don't think she's going to have one of these roles that we were used to seeing, where she was in the shadow of the president as we had. I think we're going to see someone like Androula Vasiliou. When the last time we saw a strong woman next to a president was Androula Vasiliou. But that was back into the late 80s, early 90s when we saw a strong woman taking initiative and be part of the cabinet. Let's not forget that she is a senior diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and she was handling really hot portfolios and hot issues. So she's a woman that knows her work.
So how do you interpret the appointment of the new foreign minister, somebody who is an academic, not a career diplomat like we've had in the recent past?
This is really interesting. He's a newcomer in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He's not a politician. That we will assume that a politician would have taken this role. Maybe DICO president or DICO vice president could have taken this job, and he's not someone from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I think because both they have the experience of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, both they are really confident and they know what to do. I think they have appointed someone that it's new, and I'm sure that they will support him in his new role. It's not going to be the Ministry of Foreign Affairs that will be the strong man in the ministry. I think the foreign policy will be decided in the presidential palace and executed from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So for them, it doesn't need to have this. For them, I think that's why the person that was chosen wasn't someone that he has his own agenda, but it's going to be one that will execute the presidential palace agenda.
And that's why we see a very strong diplomatic office at the presidential palace with appointments of technocrats that have been close to the then foreign minister when the president was foreign minister. Before we move on to foreign policy and the regional things, let's just stay a bit longer in the domestic issues and talk a bit why this is still a new political moment for Cyprus, because we see the two larger parties almost going for renewal, both on the left and on the right, especially the almost incumbent party of leadership, the former party of President Christodoulidis, DC, the EPP member party, is going through a very rough renewal. Can we talk a bit about that? And then parliamentary politics, what would it look like?
What's happening in this party right now, it's really revolutionary. We see two millennials, Anita Dimitriou and Dimitris Dimitriou. We have this with our surnames in Cyprus, Georgiou and Dimitris Dimitriou. These people are in their late 30s, early 40s. They were talking about millennials they are the only two that are running for the party. People that have a profile that suits the Finland and New Zealand. We're talking about the radical change in this. The message was well received, I think, from the party, that they need to change, and they are crossing out a generation that was waiting its turn to become the leaders of DC. They are dropping politicians that we were all expecting them to be in charge of DC for many years to come. We're talking about former finance minister Haris Georgiadis. He pulled out from the campaign. Averos Neofidou, the outgoing leader, it was a surprise that he decided to step down, because even though he didn't make it to the second round, he actually did well, getting like 26% of the vote. Wasn't a bad, wasn't considered a defeat or a complete defeat, because he was running against Nikos Christodoulidis, who was also a DC member until 15 days before the election. So we're talking about a real change in DC. In Agele,
the left wing, for members of the Nordic left.
I think they are looking how they will reestablish their connection with the center left and maybe the center, even the center right. They were very happy with the results. The 30% that Andreas Mavrogiannis took in the first round, and the 48% that they managed to get in the second round, along with the embracing from personalities of the right, like Yanakis Kassoulidis, or outgoing finance minister Konstantinos Petridis, and Kitti, the daughter of the late, the founder of DC, of Glafkos Klidis. All these people endorsed the candidate of Akel, Andreas Mavrogiannis. And the bet for Akel now is how it will establish or keep a connection with these people that they come from Moderator right, center left, the Greens, the Social Democrats in Cyprus that supported Andreas Mavrogiannis. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they will react. For decades now, everyone was expecting Akel to evolve into the Labour Party of Cyprus, so that it would be able to keep in people from the left and from the center in one party. And Stefanos Stefanou, the party leader of Akel, even before the election, said that he's willing to open the party, but it remains to be seen.
Okay. Before I give the floor to Emine, there are two other points I want to ask you. The first is on the economy of Cyprus, because this discussion sometimes gets lost between the politics and the socioeconomics. Given that this president will not have parliamentary majority, that he will need to get bills through parliament, there are big significant issues in the Cypriot economy that he will need to turn around. Could you just give us a top line of what these issues are, the likely socioeconomic issues that this president will need to address, and what coalitions would he need in parliament to get them through?
Having a president that doesn't have the majority in the parliament is not a new thing for Cyprus, but it has always been difficult. Outgoing administration of President Anastasiadis didn't have the majority, neither Christofias for half of his term, and we'll have to go back in 2008 to find a president that had a majority in the parliament. That was Tasos Papadopoulos. So he's going to be a weak president that we need to figure out what are the right compromise that he has to do. And this has always been the case, or many cases, in the Cypriot politics. And yes, he has to find a way to deal with the political parties, and especially we have to go back to the basic now, to the spending. We are having now an opposition from the left that wants more support because of inflation, wants higher wages through ATA, and ways to increase the salaries of
Can we just explain what ATA is, because it's a big contentious issue here, right?
Yeah. The ATA is, I'm sorry, I can't remember
the acronym, but it's the incremental increase on inflation.
On inflation, yes.
On wages. Actually, public sector wages, it excludes private sector wages.
Yeah, it excludes most of the private sector. We see that some people in the private sector do have these timarithmos and this increase in their wage. This is going to be significant from day one. The high cost of energy is going to be on the table, and this is really controversial because we are having the public sector controlling the electricity right now. It has to open, and Nikos Christodoulidis will find it difficult to deal with the trade unions and the people there. We have the productivity of the public sector that is not doing great, and Nikos Christodoulidis comes from the public sector, knows the weakness, and he has also observed how difficult it is through his time in the presidential palace and as a minister, how difficult it is to reform the public sector. He will need alliances, and I think this will be the right alliance for him. Actually, there is an open invitation from Nikos Christodoulidis for this to join the government, an invitation that was turned down, but I'm not sure as we go along with this presidency, nobody's sure whether this will return to the government in one way or another. We already see some members of this from this party. They have joined the government of Nikos Anastasiadis, and I think in the future, if he decides to go on with rough and difficult reforms, he will need all the support he will need to get, and this will come from this. I think again,
I have to stop you here on that because we have one question that has come through, and then I need to pass the floor to Emine. The question is that will the new government enhance its diplomacy toward trilateral schemes in the paradigm of Greece, Cyprus, Greece, Egypt, or Cyprus, Greece, Israel cooperation?
I think that this government will build on the trilateral agreements that they already have. Because Christodoulides said in one of the debates that his proudest moment as a foreign minister was the trilateral meetings, and he really believes that they add value and counterbalance Turkey in the area. One of the first phone calls that he received was from Sisi, the president of Egypt, and one of the warmest phone calls that he received was from Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. So I think he's going to try and keep these relations really in a very good way, and we have to see how this will balance with Cyprus being an EU member.
Thank you, George. I think for the first round of comments, we've given a good indication of the parliamentary dynamics, the style of foreign policy that he will pursue, the likely compromises he would have to make on his domestic agenda, the socioeconomic issues. I'll now pass on to Emine. Emine, we were all very saddened with the loss of life in the recent earthquakes in Turkey and the loss of life of a number of Turkish Cypriot children and families. This reality has triggered support from Greece and from Cyprus towards Turkey, Syria, and the Turkish Cypriots. In light of these events, the interconnectedness of life between Turkey and Turkish Cypriots have become more evident, and is coupled with the dependency, the economic dependency that Turkish Cypriots have on a vulnerable Turkish economy. Could you enlighten us and give us your perspective in this new political moment, what we should think of when we think of the Turkish Cypriot perspective?
Yeah, indeed, the earthquake is the major overwhelming concern and point of discussion at the moment where we are, for a number of reasons. Obviously, there is the closeness, the historical, cultural, ethnicity bonds with Turkey that makes it more painful for the population here. There is the other connection that, you know, I'm not sure how many people are aware of, and that is that in the more recent decades, the population or the influx of people coming to Cyprus, to North Cyprus, to work and to settle and actually establish a home, have been predominantly from Hatay, Adana region. So any average Turkish Cypriot like myself are surrounded. They are our neighbors, they are our employees, our co-workers, they are our hairdressers, our market owners. So all around us, we are living together with people directly affected. And automatically, this brings another kind of sensitivity and involvement. I think a lot of us feel really very involved through the people living around us who are from that area. The other issue, of course, connected with that is because of those people living in North Cyprus who originate from the earthquake region, especially when we think of Hatay, where it would appear that the government has said to them, Hatay is closed, is finished, you must go. People have been encouraged to go if they have somewhere else to go, or can go to other cities and places, or have relatives somewhere to go. Then a certain proportion of these have started to come to Cyprus. The newspaper this week mentioned around 3,500 so far. this number can increase and will increase, I think. And that is another factor that the Turkish Cypriots will have to accommodate and live with, because we're talking about a very tiny scale. I mean, the scale of death and displacement in Turkey because of the earthquake is horrendous. But we're a population of, I don't know, 350, 400,000 people. And this is our whole population, our schools and our hospitals and our roads and our residences are based on those numbers. And to have thousands come quite suddenly will create its own challenges for us. There'll be economic issues as to who is going to actually take on helping and assisting these people. Will either Turkey be helping, or will the authorities here be expected to help? I mean, there's been a wave, as there has been from everywhere, both in the region and the world, of donations and help to victims. But here, it will be deeper in that we will have to, if necessary, look at schools, hospitals, and other services that are needed by these people. And the other, of course, important issue is that in this shock, a priority of our administration has been to look at buildings, look at schools, look at hospitals. Because Cyprus is also in the earthquake region, and we have old buildings. We have buildings, we call them pre-74, let's say, that may be less able to withstand anything strong. So there is this going on at the same time. So the earthquake is, and I always say, it's like human beings, also governments, administrations, parties, they all have priorities or agendas. And at the moment, it's very difficult to get anybody to think or talk about anything except the ramifications of the earthquake on us here in the north.
You recently had municipal elections just before Christmas or the end of year, which had a shift also in the balance of power between the different political affinities that we think we know that goes on in the North Cyprus. So municipal elections, sort of, it's very much grassroots work. It's very much community work.
Indeed, and I think what the electorate has said is that when it comes to local authorities and success stories in past records of mayors, the left or the more left of centre and more what we call pro-solution parties have gained more municipalities, and some major cities have been lost by the more nationalist, the more right of centre party, and the governing party and the party of Mr. Ersin Tatar have lost major cities, which people like myself have been happy to see. But it doesn't necessarily mean that there's anything substantial that's going to change in the overall politics, whether it be of the parliamentary system and therefore the government in power, or of the leader of the community who is responsible for conducting negotiations or relations with in the context of the Cyprus problem. So it's a victory, but not a major one at the moment, especially in line of how hardline our present leader is, and the people who are supportive, and they are substantial over pro-solution, more left of centre parties, that they don't have much hope, and they don't really have any direct impact either at the moment to influence the leader or the governing party to be more proactive, to be more reconciliatory, to be more to prioritize the Cyprus problem, if you like. And even this week, when we look at the meeting that was held with Colin, what's his name?
Colin Stewart.
Yes.
Colin Stewart.
Yeah. Okay. It was just a kind of icebreaker, maybe, or just something informal. But the body language of it, everything about it was just very underwhelming. So I think that's a premonition of the lack of intensity we're going to see in the Cyprus problem, unfortunately, because as we know, the whole issue is that we are looking for, and that was the criticism around the failure in 2017 in Crans-Montana, was insufficient political will. And there is nothing today that makes that statement any less valid. If anything, it looks like there's even less political will, because at least then we had a leader that was more supportive, and now we don't have that. We have a leader that keeps repeating a two-state, recognized two-state solution. So there's some disappointment. And
I'll go back into the economic dependence on a vulnerable economy of Turkey, because Turkish Cypriot public sector is the largest sector. Funnily enough, the public sector in the Republic of Cyprus is also the largest chunk of our, working population. So private sector actually funds public sector, but in your case, your economy, the economy of the community, is totally funded, if I'm not mistaken, by Turkey. And Turkey is going through a vulnerability in its economy. How are Turkish Cypriots expecting to ride this moment of vulnerability, both emotional from the earthquakes, but also economic?
This is something that will play out in the weeks and months to come, about how, because you're correct that our economy is largely dependent, not totally. I'm not an expert on the economy, but some say it's between 60 and 75% of the gap in our ability to produce and create money for the budget is financed by Turkey at the moment. But this is a little bit chicken egg. I think what has happened is that this community, in its unrecognized, embargoed, isolated bubble, has a kind of a comfort zone in which they are bailed out. It's like a spoilt child, that they can make some taxation, and they can try to generate income in the public sector and be supportive. But wherever they fall short, it will come from Turkey. So maybe I'm thinking of the glass half full. Maybe this can be a wake-up call. Maybe this can be, because there are parties, including ones that I support, that claim that if we really put our mind to it, we can create more out of our own revenue without needing so much from Turkey. We just have to put our minds to it. But it's become an easy and lazy form of doing politics in the north of Cyprus, whereby, you've always got, the Republic of Turkey to fall back on for your shortfalls. So, but how Turkey will respond, because yes, at the moment Turkey is talking about, there's talk of donation conferences as well, in order to help Turkey rebuild the absolutely millions of people, homes for the millions of people that have been displaced. But within that budget, what comes here is not so large, so maybe it won't have that much of an impact. But we will see. And the other thing about that interdependence, by the way, irrespective of the earthquake, is that for myself, the most harmful part of it is the relationship it creates, whereby you can be dictated to about where you spend public funds. So if we need hospitals and we need schools rebuilt, but the money comes from Turkey for infrastructure and with instructions that you must build a mosque on every corner or in every village. I'm exaggerating to show the point. For example, that is not a good thing. Or if there's financial assistance coming with instructions that we must reduce trade union rights or freedom of speech, freedom of thought, the media. This is the danger that I see, as well as the fluctuation and the whole instability of the Turkish lira and so on. It's also getting assistance with that price tag that is not like maybe the European Union will also support, but for you to become more aligned and harmonized with the European Union in your laws or your infrastructure and your standards. That's a different kind of price tag, let's say. But the price tag that we're seeing more and more, which is getting a bit more heavy-handed, is maybe it includes Islamicization, maybe more of the north, reduction in a standard of freedom of speech and human rights and civil liberties that is clearly higher here than it is in Turkey, especially at the moment. So it is complicated and quite worrying from my point of view.
This is important to raise and to create awareness around. But we have another question from the audience. What has been the reaction of the Turkish Cypriot media to the election, the Republic of Cyprus election, and if any of the two candidates was a favorite?
I don't think the Turkish Cypriots thought in terms of being more in favor of one or the other. There will be political parties who have historical closeness, like Akel would always be closer to CTP or the left-wing parties here. So maybe there would have been some kind of preference there, in that maybe through Akel and through Mavroyiannis's statements as well, maybe some of us could have hoped that he would be more forthcoming in reconciliation, in dialogue, and in restarting talks that achieve a result. So I think maybe in that respect, Christodoulides is seen as less likely to be interested in solving the Cyprus problem. But beyond that, I really don't think that talking about priorities and the agenda, it's not been a very major point of discussion. And also, it's this thing that George introduced at the beginning about, okay, how much change is this change in leadership going to bring for the Republic of Cyprus? Are we going to see a major, shift in either direction in the relationship with the Turkish Cypriots? Because, as we speak about interdependence, as we speak about the direct impact that could just change in 60 seconds, an earthquake of 60 seconds can make so much difference to what's happening in the north. One would think that, one has to understand that the reason why this interdependence has become deeper and deeper and stronger and kind of inevitable is because the interdependence or the interaction or the prospects of being a united Cyprus, in which the Republic of Cyprus embraces both the Greek Cypriots and the Turkish Cypriots, is getting weaker. It's always been fairly weak, but it gets weaker and weaker. Personally, if I observe a meeting of the two leaders as they leave, the only kind of prospect for a next step is, Christodoulides is saying, "Oh, we must have dinner sometime on a social basis." This is not it. This is not how you reunify the island, because you do not have two communities who are unable to even play a football match one day, and then the next day, because you've got a solution, say the Annan plan that happened, then you've got a successful implementation of federal ministries with a Greek Cypriot and Turkish Cypriot sitting at either end of a desk in the ministry. It's not going to happen. So I think we need to see it from this perspective as well. And what happens, because you mentioned, Cleopatra, the term grassroots, and I believe very much in the power of grassroots. But at the same time, you have to see the limitation or the impact on grassroots of this cold distance on leadership level that makes everybody think, oh, what's the point? Why should I go out and have a big rally for a solution when I know my leader is, he's probably not even going to go to dinner with the leader on the other side. So it does bring like a wet blanket on any possible enthusiasm and action by grassroots who want to see change in the frozen conflict, as you so rightly mentioned.
Thank you, Emine. George, where does the Cyprus problem stand on President Christodoulidis' agenda? Is it a priority, or is it number 2 or a number 3 issue, given his foreign policy or domestic agenda?
I think that his first move to go and arrange a meeting and meet with the Turkish Cypriot leader, Mr. Qatar, shows that it was Cyprus problem is high on his agenda. But during the presidential campaign, I must say that Cyprus unification was not the number 1 issue, or it was the number 1 issue along with a couple of other issues as well. And let's not forget that we spent the last 5 years without any real negotiations. We spent the last 2.5 years waiting for Turkey to come within the night. I think that was the expression that President Erdogan was using, and watching all this conflict, or not exactly a conflict, but a potential conflict in the Aegean. So it made the Greek Cypriot really, I would say.
So we kind of, the Greek Cypriots fell back into their defensive position. In
the defensive position, Nikos Christodoulidis was labeled a hardline, and many of his supporters are definitely hardliners on the Cyprus issue. And yes, we shouldn't expect from this administration to be, it would be a real surprise to see from this administration moves out of the box. Let's not forget that Mr. Christodoulidis comes from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, a well-structured ministry that knows how to play with Cyprus problem. And I think they are part, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, sometimes it's part of the non-solving the problem. But definitely,
let's just correct that. It's not part. It's about advocating.
Yeah.
A position that is hard.
Yes.
In addressing the regionality of the problem.
Yes, and the other thing, I wouldn't expect any breakthrough or any out of the box moves from Mr. Christodoulidis. But at the same time, what is important for Mr. Christodoulidis is to keep an ongoing dialogue. I think what matters the most right now for Mr. Christodoulidis and this administration and Cyprus in general is to keep an open line with Turkish Cypriots and Turkey as a way for breakthrough in the energy, because we want to see Cyprus wants to have a role in the Eastern Mediterranean energy things that are going on, both with Egypt and Israel, and definitely wants Turkey on board and Turkish Cypriots on board, or they want to establish that they won't have any warships coming offshore where they were going to drill. And they are looking, I think, with really interest the the current earthquake and the disaster that brought in Turkey, and the rapprochement that seems to be beginning between Athens and Ankara, and what the role they will have into this relationship. And also they want to know where Turkey stands between West and East and the war in Ukraine. They're not sure right now where Turkey stands, and this will help doesn't help them right now to make their calculations what is possible and what is not possible to get out from what we call the Cyprus problem. And we're not talking right now about an imminent reunification of the island, but how the relations of the two communities and the relations of Greece and Turkey are going to improve in the near future. I think they want to be part, and they cannot avoid that, to be part of the Greek-Turkish relationship. What they want to establish is that they will not be thrown under the bus as this relation will evolve.
Thank you. Emine, you've spoken about the interconnectedness, the interdependence, the vulnerability, the possible trends that are happening in Turkey being imposed on Turkish Cypriot Islamization, the priority of, suppressing possibly freedom of speech. If in the last 10 minutes that we have of this webinar, what would you like to see change? Is it a mindset change? Both you and Georgiou almost agree that we need to keep the conversation going, that we need to keep grassroots engaged, that there needs to be some authenticity in the willingness to open up the possibility of a rapprochement on the Cyprus problem. Where do you think it will, if it's not at leaders level, is there any other level that the Cyprus issue can be unblocked? And George, think about that question too, because I'm coming to you later.
If it's not at leadership level, it is harder. Civil society, bi-communal, as we call them, or intercommunal relationships are important. And again, there are things that are not planned, but are kind of flow naturally, that we can think about. And that can be quite unexpected. And to give an example of this is petrol prices, and how suddenly there were, many, many more cars with Republican Cyprus number plates on our side getting petrol. And then when they're on our side getting petrol, they'll have a chat with the petrol attendant, or they'll also buy a bottle of something, or maybe sit and have a sandwich. And then I think, I can't measure it. It's not measurable in meters or feet, but I can kind of feel some kind of normalization of interacting that brought about by economic conditions. Added to that, the whole drop in the value of the TL against the euro makes it very, attractive maybe to come and eat, spend, shop.
And go on holidays.
Yeah, stay over, in nice places on this side. So there's a kind of natural flow that, what can we hope for or wait to see is that...
But also the Greek Cypriot hotels on this side have been recruiting more and more Turkish Cypriots. It's very visible. So there is this sort of soft power interaction.
Yeah, brought about by economic conditions. Yeah, and not necessarily a desire for everybody to, reunite or share the island, but just conditions, because life goes on. I always say this, you can be frozen and you can stick to your political positions in the style of Tatar or the Republic of Cyprus Foreign Ministry instruction book, But, life goes on. And if, you're very sick on this side and you think you're going to get better expertise, you go to a hospital in the Republic, or, and there are many people who will come for a nose job or or Botox on this side. There is some kind of natural conditions propelled by the economy that will happen.
How do you see the EU? There is a question from the audience. The EU, where do you see the role of the EU solving the Cyprus problem? Again, a question to both of you.
Yeah.
So if you could conclude with that, Emine, and then I'll pass on to George.
The EU is a desire of those who are strong supporters of reunification. But the kind of leadership we have now, the party in power and our community leader, Tatar, it's not high on their agenda. It's not a popular or an ambition, because the political parties or the governments that have embraced this as an ambition, and I've been involved in some of those activities and policies, is to work, to do the homework as much as we can. And in that respect, there is some support, as you know, coming to the north, but within very limited guidelines again that are imposed. But, if you need to change legislation on, how the government works, on tenders, on standards, on
health and safety, human rights, again, then, I've worked in environments, whether it's civil society or administration, working to get this homework done. But when there's a change of government, if that drops from the agenda, then again, it's chicken and egg. It brings a cooling off against the EU. Then the EU is not so motivated to come and try to encourage people in our community to do this homework. And also, I don't think, especially at the moment, I don't think the Turkish Cypriots feel that the EU is very, is sufficiently engaged with them. There are projects, there are investments, there are supported schemes to help and to bring some financial assistance to various fields in the north, including business, education, culture. But it just remains superficial. It's not going deep enough. And I think so long as, again, this top-down, bottom-up, if it doesn't strike a chord or some harmony, then it's going to continue to cool off for a little while longer, I think, unfortunately. Thank you, Emine. Thanks for your contribution. George, you have 4 minutes to comment on the Cyprus issue, on what mindset we need to see change and where's the role of the EU.
Yeah, I think the mindset that we need to change is to find ways to communicate and cooperate in a civilian level. I don't think we're going to go for a big breakthrough right now unless we find ways, open more checkpoints for crossing, make the life easier to each other, cooperate into the common natural disasters and environmental challenges that we have, finding ways to get the benefits from the gas that has already been found in the area, find ways to relieve the stress in the buffer zone and make the buffer zone a less dangerous place for people. I think this is the way forward at this point. And Emine is right that people have found a way to adjust. It's almost 20 years now. I think it was March when the first checkpoint opened 20 years ago. So we were talking about 20 years now living side by side. And what seems to worry us is not the relation between the two communities, but the relation between the Greece and Turkey. And as for the EU relation, Cleopatra, I think the honeymoon of the Republic of Cyprus and the European Union is well behind. Ever since the economic meltdown of 2013, even before of how the relations of Greece turned with Brussels and Germany, with the memorandums and all these anti-EU speeches that we've heard. I think we are really Eurosceptic right now in Cyprus, and if it wasn't for the Cyprus problem and the dangerous area that we are in, I think Cyprus would have been one of the more Eurosceptic countries in the world right now. But it's not, exactly because they know how they feel the safety of the European Union. Yes, we also have to see how the relations between EU and Russia are going to evolve in the next couple of years. The Russians in Cyprus are not only the offshore companies. We're talking about a population of 40,000 people. Most of them they are in mixed marriages, and it's going to be really interesting to see how these will evolve in the next couple of years.
I mean, looking ahead, we look at the multi-ethnic Cyprus. If we hear what Emine has said and what you have said, George, and the realities of our region, with migration and a heavy influx of migrants that are here to stay, it seems, because we see them. They are in our neighborhoods, in our villages, everywhere. It seems we're looking at a different demographic for Cyprus and for our political discourse. I think on this note, I hope we have enlightened our audience on where Cyprus stands and where Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, and the wider sort of community issues here stand. I thank Emine Colak, I thank Georgiou. On behalf of Eliamep, we look forward to engaging further on issues that relate to Cyprus and our region. Thank you all for staying with us during this hour.